Hi, and welcome back to Poltergeist Board Games. Today, I have the pleasure of having Bob Phaneuf with me from Fortress Games. Thank you, Bob, for taking the time to come on my channel. I really appreciate it.
Great to be here, Scott. Been looking forward to it.
So, Bob is, as I said, the head of Fortress Games, and they have 8th Air Force game, which box set, the 20th Air Force, which is a box set, and now you've made the Save South Vietnam a box set, and then I imagine Save Afghanistan Comrade also box set.
It's so the last inventory of Save Afghanistan Comrade is pretty much out the door, and we're ordering new inventory in a box set with a mounted game board. Yeah, so that will be. You never know with printing partners when that will be, but it'll be soon, hopefully.
Okay, cool. I had bought 8th Air Force, and I enjoyed I had the box set, and I enjoyed that a lot. It's a very fun game, and I
Thank
think
you.
the next one I want to get is Save South Vietnam, because I don't have any Vietnam games, and
It's a popular one. Save South Vietnam and 8th Air Force are our best-selling games. Save South Vietnam is a very popular game, and people seem to enjoy it quite a bit. It's a journey from the beginning of the Vietnam War, of our conventional involvement in 1965, all the way till the fall of South Vietnam, or you win. Hopefully the latter.
yeah. All right. So this is 10 questions with Bob Phaneuf. So number one, tell us about how Fortress Games came about.
Well, actually, Scott, started during COVID. We were all locked in. We're all locked in, had nothing to do. I got in the habit of taking a morning walk every morning. Just grab a cup of coffee and a cigar and go for a walk, a long walk. And I'd always wanted to. I always thought Luftwaffe, the game Luftwaffe, Avalon Hill Luftwaffe, was a great game that had some serious defects that made it, not a great game. The story was a great story and all that, but having to write out, I don't know if you ever played it, but you had to write out your missions on a pad and paper in advance if you're the Americans, and all that stuff was, I thought, sort of defective. But I always wanted to design a game that took Luftwaffe, the game Luftwaffe, and made it really fun and playable. And walking around on one of those walks one morning, I thought of what became 8th Air Force and also 20th Air Force, and I had like one of those eureka moments where I said, I totally get it. I know what I can do to make this game a great game. At the time, I was only thinking it would be for my own amusement, my friends' amusements. So I built the game and got enough comments from people saying this is an extraordinary game. You got to make some effort to publish it. So one thing led to another, and I formed the company Fortress Games as a publisher, and copyrighted the 8th Air Force and 20th Air Force game designs, and put them out on Kickstarter, and was pleasantly surprised at the response.
It's awesome. Yeah, I haven't played Loot, but I own it, but it sits on my shelf of shame. So
I'm sure my shelf of shame is bigger. I'm very embarrassed to say.
I just actually got rid of some games because I'm like, I don't see you guys, and I don't know if I will see you in the future. So bye.
Well, I'm dividing my shelf of shame now into two different categories: the games I've never played and the games I've never even taken out of the shrink wrap, and both are embarrassing.
Luckily, all of my games I take out of the shrink wrap.
Good for you.
I at least play them once, or twice. So.
Smart.
The concepts for Safe South Vietnam and Afghanistan began because those are both interesting. I mean, like Vietnam, has been done quite a bit, but like Afghanistan really hasn't been touched that much. And then, like, how come not save the Falklands or save, Korea? You know what I mean? Like, how did you decide on those two?
So the first of the two that I designed was Save Afghanistan, Comrade, because I was fascinated by the war in Afghanistan, for exactly the reasons you said. We all are fascinated by Vietnam, but there's a lot of books and games. You know, if you're interested in Vietnam, there's a lot of things to look at. Save Afghanistan, I think, for how important and how remarkable that war was, is massively undergamed and even underpublished. So in terms of books. So I read a bunch of books on it and designed a game. This is long before Fortress Games existed. Designed a game on it. And the thing I felt that needed to be captured was insurgencies are never, ever, ever defeated by military force alone. It's a military political conflict. And you have to win. The military is more of a shield to defend the country while you win the political conflict, right? So and it's a hard thing to game, but I thought I had some concepts that worked and Save Afghanistan, Comrade. So I designed it for my own amusement, and I really enjoyed it. And I realized the same concept could be taken to the Vietnam War. Again, Vietnam War, the military is a shield to protect the political process while you build up a viable government and a viable native army, South Vietnamese or Afghan in the case of the Afghan War. And I thought I pulled it off well. Back when I designed it, one of the reasons why Fortress Games came about is in the year 2020, 2021, we can do things like copyright games and trademark companies and build companies and register them and license them and all that stuff. We can all do that online. It's very easy. Back when I designed Save Afghanistan, Comrade, probably 2000, 2001, there was a laborious process. The internet and things you could do on the internet were not where they are today. So back then you would have had to hire an army of lawyers and, et cetera, army of artists, because graphic art programs didn't exist. So you couldn't use that as a help and things like that. So times have changed. So that's the only reason why back then that game was never published. Publishing didn't seem practical back then. But the game, I knew the game was just a great game. And I really enjoyed Save Afghanistan, Comrade. And the concept clearly was easy to port over to Vietnam. Vietnam had a few extra things that Afghanistan didn't have. You had North Vietnam, which was a sovereign country that was attacking South Vietnam, which you didn't have in Afghanistan. And you had the border sanctuaries in Cambodia and Laos, which you didn't. It was true in Pakistan, but not to the same extent that it was with the Ho Chi Minh Trail going through Cambodia and Laos. So there's a few different twists on it, but it worked. And so those games became kind of a twin game concept. And once Fortress Games was up and running with 8th and 20th Air Force being published, it was an easy transition to turn these games that I had made into professional games and get them, correct artwork done and the instructions written up properly, the manuals and all that, and get them out there. And now it's even more gratifying that they're popular enough. Save South Vietnam's on its third printing and popular enough that it makes sense to invest in mounted game boards and boxes. The first version, my first Kickstarter version, was out in a folio. And so, Fortress Games will always be box games with mounted game boards from now on. And it's fun, it's fun to see those games make that transition.
I don't know if you've seen other videos on my channel, but I complain about paper maps. I hate paper maps because you always have, that ridge,
Right.
and then you're trying to balance that unit, and he slides this way, that, So I love mounted boards. So I'm glad.
Yeah, especially if it's a tracking counter, right? You got that tracking counter, it's on the fold. You're like, oh wait, what number was that on?
Yeah. It's like you have to try to and I haven't gotten any plexiglass. I mean, that's a simple solution
Right.
to, get plexiglass to put it over.
But that gives you a little glare. I mean, it's got its own problems too.
Yeah, I've been told that if you get it too thick, then you can't really see exactly where you're
Right.
putting it because the depth of it. But anyways, let's see. Number 3, what is next on the game design front for Fortress Games? I think everyone is looking forward to your next design.
Oh, thank you. Well, we've got 3 things. So we've got 3 games, but the first one's going to come out is probably 50% there. And that's I'll give a little bit away about that. That game I'm hoping to get onto Kickstarter by late summer. And as anybody who's listening to this who has had experience with Fortress Games on Kickstarter, that we don't we don't use Kickstarter as a way to raise money to make a game. We have never had a Kickstarter where we didn't have the entire game off to the printer well before the end of the Kickstarter. Kickstarter is typically 60 days. We typically have everything out to the printer within weeks of starting the Kickstarter. I just want to get a feel for how many games I would need to order, but it's our corporate philosophy that we just won't use Kickstarter money to fund the actual game. We're not making people wait that long. So we try, in the ideal world, we'd have those Kickstarters out, that we'd have the mailing things out the day the Kickstarter ends, but it never works that way because printers aren't as fast as we'd like them to be. Although God bless them, they do the best they can do. But we've got the one game that is probably, like I said, late summer. Then we've got two more games that are probably set for next year, and I'm not going to talk about those at all because they're still top secret. But I will give you a little. I'll give you a little visual. The game is a World War I aviation game, and a lot of the work is done. We're involved in what I call late stage rules adjustments and play testing. The early concepts have made it through, and we used a great artist out of Halifax. A bunch of your listeners will no doubt know Peter Robichaud, and he did the artwork. This will be the box cover. I don't know if can you see the whole thing? I can't tell in my view.
Yeah, I can. I mean, we see the two planes, and yeah,
You see the whole thing?
yeah,
Okay. Yeah,
that
so it's a beautiful painting he made. That'll be our box cover for the game, and it's like I said, it's a World War I aviation game, and I think we've put into it some really interesting concepts. So I think it's got a couple twists to it that folks are really going to like. But I'll let the market decide that. But we'll do it through a Kickstarter, and it never goes as fast as we like. But I really do believe we can make late summer work.
great. Now, will this be a squadron level or individual?
Well, I don't want to give away too much. It's a fair question. It's a fair question, but I'm just going to say for now, it's a World War I aviation game. When we get a little further along, I promise to give out more information. I promise I'll send it to you when I get it out. Promise.
Fair. Thank you so much. That's great. That's everyone will be excited about that because there's a lot of interest in World War I, and will it be solitaire?
It will be. No, this one will be both, but it will be designed not to be a hackneyed solitaire game. Like the solitaire will be a true solitaire game, but it lends itself very nicely to a two-player game too. So it'll be both, but it won't be a like I said, it won't be a hybrid solitaire game. The solitaire game will be a solid solitaire game.
Great, that's awesome. All right, I'm excited about that.
I'll keep you posted.
Thank you. What sets your games apart from others in the market?
So a lot of your listeners will probably laugh when I say this, but I think one of the greatest games ever designed is Monopoly. Because if you think about Monopoly, it's three stages. What makes it the most popular game in history is they made it so it evolves. The game you start with is not the game you finish with. When you start, you're just racing around on a land grab, right? The middle of the game is you're trying to consolidate and build up your strong areas, and the last part of the game is you're trying to avoid the enemy's traps while they fall into your traps. The end of the game of Monopoly is nothing like the beginning of game of Monopoly. It goes through a true evolution, and I think that's very cool in games. And I've tried to make all of my games have an evolutionary process. If you played, I think probably the best example of that is 20th Air Force. 20th Air Force is the U.S. strategic bombing campaign against Japan in basically 1945, late 44 until the end of the war. And when you play 20th Air Force, you'll realize very quickly you're starting with a very limited number, obviously, of B-29 groups, but they're also poorly trained. You don't have full intelligence on the locations of war industries and other things in Japan. You're using high explosive bombs only. So the game starts out with sort of precision bombing attacks on known aircraft factories and other things that maybe your boss wants you to your bosses at the higher levels want you to focus on. But over the course of the game, you develop incendiaries, you start firebombing cities, you have research being done on the atomic bomb. There's no guarantee you'll get it. You have to do your job well in order to get that atomic bomb. In other words, you need to be showing success. So the research effort back home keeps on supporting you. So at the beginning of the game, limited bombers, usually high altitude, precision bombing of very, very finite targets. By the end, you're firebombing every city in Japan, trying to literally destroy every Japanese city of any size whatsoever using fire bombs and eventually atom bombs. So the evolution of the game 20th Air Force from beginning to end is literally the game you're playing at the end is nothing like the game you're playing at the beginning. And I like that. And I try to make all the games like that, all my games like that. And Save Afghanistan, Comrade, or Save South Vietnam, you're starting out with the government you're protecting, South Vietnam or Afghanistan, in complete crisis mode, right? Collapsing in the face of a violent insurgency, and in the case of Vietnam, also the infiltration of NVA regiments into South Vietnam. So you're starting out stepping into a crisis, trying to hold off a crisis. By the end of the game, you better have a strong South Vietnamese army because you're on your own now fighting a conventional war against typically mostly North Vietnamese opponent trying to save South Vietnam. So I like games that have that kind of evolution. I think we do well at making our games have those aspects. So you're really interested throughout, and you're following an evolutionary process.
Yeah, yeah, that's I mean, like I played 8th Air Force, and you know, like I told you before, I really enjoyed you know, progressing through that game.
Right.
It's very enjoyable.
Yeah, and that, like on 8th Air Force, you start out having to bomb submarine pens, and
Mhm.
it's very difficult. You know, you've got a bunch of tasks and very few planes bombing submarine pens and railroads and river crossings and things like that. When all you really want to do is bomb those aircraft factories and war
Yeah,
industries, but
yeah,
and then
that's
it
what
evolves
got
till at
me.
the end you're sending massive fleets to try to devastate German industry. In the meantime, the Germans are getting smarter and smarter and setting up jets and things and rocket fighters and things like that to you. So
Yeah. Um, all right. Tell us about your journey to creating your first. Well, you kind of went over that. You with your long walks and
I,
during COVID years.
yeah,
So,
thank you, COVID. At least one good thing came out of COVID.
right. It's funny because I talked to someone else, Ben Rawlings. I think he really started designing heavily in art design in during COVID as well.
But we
Like,
all had a little bit of spare time on our hands. I mean, even if you're still working, you probably weren't going to the office, then you weren't socializing with your friends like you normally would. I mean, it was a crazy time. It probably was a pretty good time to be creative.
yeah. Let's see. What challenges have you faced as a board game company owner, and how did you overcome them?
Um, as a board game, you know, I'll say as the primary designer, one of the things as a designer, you one thing you'll have to focus. I mean, I'm sure every other designer has told you this, is you've got to manage your creative times because we're all not real creative all the time. And there are times when your creative juices are flowing and you got to be disciplined and say, I'm taking advantage of this time. And, sometimes I've worked on designs until 3 o'clock in the morning because I know things are working. And other times I can't get anything. I can't do anything constructive. And those times I try to do other things that are important for moving the company Fortress Games forward. But, managing that creative time when you're lucky enough that it's hitting, you got to manage that well. As the owner of a game publisher, um, I'd say it's the things that we don't control that kills us, that bothers us. Like I control a lot here, but when I have to send it out to third party vendors, and again, my printing partners, I'm not being critical of them all. They've been great, but they want to make sure they get things right too. So when I send them print files, I send them all this information. I want it tomorrow, but they very prudently say it's going to take us a while to make sure that we've got this working right. We want to test. We want to do tests and send them to you. Make sure you like them. We want to make it the best fit possible, and that they might have to send something off to someone to do something specialized, and so those processes you have to, as a game board, as a board game company owner, you have to think through the time that's going to be involved in that, and try to, you know, keep your customers' expectations realistic, and your own expectations realistic, and try to manage those. So it's like I imagine most people who own companies know it's always the things you can't control that are the hardest on you. But on the other hand, what that what that makes us do and be very disciplined about is we try to be very good about the things we can control. We try to be very disciplined about doing those things right. You know, the errata that's had to be sent out on Fortress games could be printed in large print on a 3x5 card, and it wasn't meaningful errata. It was, you know, a page number referenced the wrong page number, or on a chart the outcome was looking at the wrong column, and those had to be correct. But in terms of having to correct rules or having to correct whole stack, we've never had to do that. On 8th Air Force, Save Afghanistan, Comrade, and Save South Vietnam, not one iota of errata ever went out. On 20th Air Force, it was some, or sorry, 8th, 20th, and Save South Vietnam. On Save Afghanistan, Comrade, a small amount of errata went out, referencing some small things. So that's the challenges and the challenges and rewards you get from owning a game publishing company.
That's remarkable that so little errata, you know, because there's a lot of companies that you know, send out, you know, like a whole page full of errata, and
Yep.
it's unfortunate because there are so many people that want to help, and you know
Right.
that will proof things, you know, and I'm in the middle of play testing and helping with rules and stuff, and you know, it's we're all here to help, you know, and
Right.
limit and mitigate those kind of errata, you know, because it's frustrating, you know, when you're playing a game and then you're playing it wrong, or you know, you misread something, you know, and but I
Yeah,
mean,
and unfortunately in our industry, you know, it's not a compliment to our industry that we've all come to expect a sheet full of errata on every game. And you know, I think we, as I said, as a game publisher, I think we got to take control of things we can control. You know,
mm,
those those game manuals were read through hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of times, including reading in reverse order to make sure we didn't miss something and all that. And again, I'm not claiming we're perfect, but that's one of the things we work very, very hard on. Is I don't want to send out a rat. It's embarrassing to me to send out a rat, and
yeah.
you know, so we work very hard at that.
Good. How do you engage with your community of players and fans?
Yeah, you know, I'm probably the worst marketer on earth, so probably not well enough would be the answer. But one thing we do try to do, like, and again, anybody who's interacted with us will know this. Um, Anybody who communicates with us gets responded to immediately. If you send us an email at Fortress Games, especially with things like rules questions and things like that, what we tell you on our website is we'll respond to you within 24 hours, but usually the same day. And I'd say most of the time it's within a couple hours of the email at most. And so we really mean that. We try to be very good in our responsiveness, because I know, you know, even though we feel like we do a good job on it, I know there's always questions. I've never played a war game where I didn't have a question when I started playing it. So I get that. And so we try to be very responsive in that way. In addition, I think because of the way we do Kickstarters, because we really do we're a little different than most companies in Kickstarters. That we really are trying to mail things out the day the Kickstarter ends.
Yeah,
That we got a lot of loyal fans on our Kickstarter from our three Kickstarters. So we get a lot of feedback through Kickstarter. When I eventually get when we're far enough along on our World War I aviation game that we get it on Kickstarter as a pre-announcement, we'll get a lot of followers to it, because I think we've developed a loyal community there that realizes that we go the extra yard to bring them a quality product and bring it in a timely manner. And you know, I'll say Facebook. I'm not much of a social media guy, but Facebook is a fantastic medium for getting the wargaming community word out to the wargaming community. There's a bunch of groups: Solitaire Wargaming Group, the Wargamers, the Board Wargamer, a bunch of these groups with thousands and thousands and thousands of followers, and they you know, they love seeing these games. They love participating in that, and I love seeing. I mean, I'm on that virtually every day. Well, definitely every day. Not just for my own stuff, but I love looking at other things people are interested in, and it's a great way for me to also realize where interests are going. And to your point earlier about World War I games, I've noticed that a lot. Like people love World War I games,
Mhm.
and there's not that many out. I think if you try real hard, you can probably find a game about the Battle of the Bulge, Stalingrad, Gettysburg. I think if you try real hard, you can find some games on those things.
Yeah,
But World War I, it's a little bit tougher.
right. It is. It is. I mean, right now, you have Western Front Ace, and
Yep,
you
yep,
have Aces of Valor, both of
yep.
which are great games, and they're both very different, because one's a squadron level and one's
Right.
individual, so
Yeah,
it's nice to have
I
both.
love seeing I love seeing those come out. By the way, I don't consider any World War One aviation game to be competition. I think it's great that there's a growing surge of interest in World War One aviation. It's a fantastic topic,
Mhm.
and has been massively undercovered. I mean, when Richthofen's War came out all those years ago, I think the
Yeah.
only other game about World War One was what was that game? Remember the old the real old game Dogfight? Dogfight. Remember Dogfight? I
I've
think that
seen
was the
that.
only
I
I think that
haven't
was the only
played.
other
I've
World
seen.
War. It's like a Milton Bradley game or something. But yeah, so it's good to see a surge of interest in that, and hopefully we'll add to it.
All right. And going back to Kickstarter, I have always shied away from Kickstarter. I just did my first Kickstarter pledge like a couple of months ago, and it was shipped, when they said it was going to ship, and but that's the reason I stay away from Kickstarter, is because I don't want to be waiting 2 to 3 years when I can just go, to online store and get it,
Yeah.
quicker and I have done that with some games. I've gotten it before other people have gotten theirs through Kickstarter, but I'll
Yeah,
definitely,
I understand. I believe you. I mean, I ordered a game on Kickstarter that literally took 2 years to get,
yeah,
and you know, I I I just don't think I don't think that's a good way to do things. We certainly will never do that. As I said, our Kickstarter community has been very happy with what we've done, and we've been very prompt at getting things out. It's measured in terms of months after the Kickstarter ends. Our games are out 6 weeks, I think, in one case. I think the other case was 2 months. The eighth and 20th Air Force, which are our last, our second edition, the box edition with new obstacle rules and mounted game boards and everything. Um, that took, I think, about 2.5 months, only because we hadn't originally planned on doing mounted game boards, but we got so many orders and so much interest. We did it without changing the price either. We did it on our own. We sent out notes to everybody saying we are so impressed by the response we've gotten to this that without adjusting the price, these both games are both going to go out only with mounted game boards. So we did that on our own late in the Kickstarter to reward all the support we were getting. And for that reason, it took 2.5 months because we put a late order in. We changed the order from regular from cardstock game boards to mounted game boards, and that had to be done from scratch. So that ended up taking 2.5 months. But I feel like that was a good reason to make people wait 2.5 months. Is we're going to make this thing as high quality as we can do.
for sure.
But yeah, you're right. It's a legitimate reason to have issues with Kickstarter. I promise you and your listeners that you won't have that issue with us. That'll never happen at Fortress Games.
Well, I look forward to your next Kickstarter.
Thank you.
I have like 8 minutes left, so I have three
Okay.
questions left. So, how do you approach the design process of your games? I mean, I know you touched a little bit. I
Yeah.
know in talking with like Thomas Van Hare, who does the war game books, he writes his is interesting because he does the history, because he's all about the historical aspect and puts the history in his books. So he writes the history first and then builds the game around that. So that's
It's
just
a
one, but everyone's got their own style.
Yeah, I get that. I get that. That is an interesting way to approach it. First of all, the topic has to be interesting because any designer will tell you that, you know, 90% of designing a game is incredibly fun, rewarding, and satisfying, and all that. 10% is grinding, and maybe 20% is grinding through hard stuff and all that. And if it's not a topic that's interesting to you, it's easy to lose interest during those grind periods. So it has to be interesting. And then I have to feel like I can give it some twist. If I'm simply going to design another Candyland or Shoots and Ladders, real, just follow the steps, whatever, to the end of the game, I'm just not going to do it. But if I can introduce something interesting, if I think I can conceptualize something that's interesting and that captures something from the actual conflict, and I can turn into a game boarding element, then I want to do it. And I've had that in all these 4 games that have gone out, and I definitely feel like I've got a great twist on World War I aviation that people are going to like. And I like it myself. So I think that's it. I've got to feel like I'm interested enough that I can go through the grind. I can make it through the grind, and I got to have something to offer. Something to offer in terms of something compelling.
Yes. All right. Can you share a memorable success story or milestone moment for your company?
Well, yeah, so first of all, I'd say that eureka moment, and there was a eureka moment. I was walking on one of my COVID walks, and I realized I figured out how I could make a great strategic bombing of Germany game, solitaire game. When I clicked, like all the pieces clicked, I said, "Oh, I get it. I can do it." And I raced home and started writing things out and all that. That was a fantastic moment. Another fantastic moment for the company was after our first Kickstarter ended with the 8th and 20th Air Force, we had a significant supply of games because we ordered far more than we needed for the Kickstarter, right? So we satisfied the Kickstarter, and the orders are coming in, and we ran out of games instantly, almost instantly, and we had a ton of them. And I was
Yeah.
like, wow, this is thrilling and so rewarding. I mean, there's nothing when someone has to buy a game, go to the effort to buy a game, and they do it, and they do it in those kind of numbers. It's a real compliment to the product you put out. And we were thrilled. I mean, it was a thrilling moment to have to run out of print again that quickly. And I was a little bit embarrassing too, because we shouldn't have run out of print right away. But the orders, we had no idea. When the Kickstarter ended, I guess there was pent up demand, and all those orders piled in, and we were out again. We've never run out of games again. We order in advance. We order plenty of them. But that was thrilling. I'd say thrilling thing quickly pre probably what got me into war game design in the first place was one of my first real war games I designed. I went to college in the early 80s. I graduated in 83. So when I was in school, the war in El Salvador was a big hot item in the newspapers and college campuses. Everybody was talking about it. And I designed a game about El Salvador. One player played the government, one player played the insurgents. And I put it in the common area of my dorm, put it in the common area, and I thought it was a pretty cool game. And it always thrilled me that I never went into that room where somebody wasn't playing, 2 people weren't playing, and a bunch of people were watching them play. And that's when I thought, man, I should do this for a living. So that was kind of exciting. But yeah, in terms of Fortress games, getting all those orders and seeing the success of those designs was just thrilling.
That's great. It's yeah, I mean I can't imagine, just selling out, quicker than you expect. That's amazing. My last question for you today is what strategies do you employ for marketing and promoting your board games? You said you're not a big
Yeah,
market, but
I guess. Well, I wish I was. I wish I was a lot better at marketing. We all have to know our strengths and weaknesses. I probably could be doing a lot more, but I definitely use. Well, I run a full page ad every War Diary magazine. If you've ever, I'm sure your listeners have heard of that. By the way, it's a fantastic. I don't like that magazine because I run a full page ad in it. I run a full page ad in it because I love that magazine. So it's if your listeners haven't checked it out, you should check out War Diary magazine. That's been a great promotion and marketing tool, and a lot of guys on YouTube will do a review of the magazine when it comes out because it's very popular with war gamers. And so my full page ad shows up there. I try to stay friendly with. I've got some friends on YouTube who are influencers there, great guys, and they've been kind enough to appreciate my games in the past. In fact, Zilla Blitz called Save South Vietnam the best game of, I think it was 2022, best game that came out in that he played in 2022. And
I love
uh,
Zillowflex. He's one of my favorites.
oh, there you go. Yeah,
Yeah,
and he loves Fortress games, and we love Zilla. I love the way he does his show. He's got a great way of doing his
he does.
YouTube thing. He's a real solid guy. So having those the Facebook groups is a big way to promo it. And the great thing about the Facebook groups is, and I'm sure I'm like everybody else, like I love when I don't look at it as spam. Like when a publisher announces their new game on Facebook, I love it. I think we're in the only industry where we all love the ads, right?
Yeah, all right.
I love one of the things I love about War Diary magazine is I look at every one of the ads,
Mhm.
and because I love war games and I love new war games that are coming out. Um, so Facebook has been great. We keep in touch with people via email and things like that. But yeah, I mean, I guess all the ways you'd expect, and certainly I wish I was smarter about doing more, but those are the main avenues we use.
Well, I think the best one is the word of mouth. And, a lot of people speak highly of Fortress games and your games, and I'm one of them. It's a game that I, will always recommend. But I am running out of time. So I do thank you so much for being on today and joining me. And thank you so much for your time.
It was my pleasure. Thank you for those nice compliments at the end. I really appreciate it. It means a lot to me that you're getting enjoyment out of them. And thank you for having me on your channel.
Okay. I'll talk to you later, and take care and have a good rest of your day.
Take care. Thank you.
All right. Bye.